Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to our DesignShop Talk. My name is Samantha Mirabal, and I'm part of Melco's applications team, and this is our DesignShop Talk where we get together on a weekly basis to try to answer your questions that you might have about DesignShop or pretty much whatever you want to talk about. Remember, you can always type in your comments on the chat thing that's going. Not messaging Melco, but on the actual event. I can only see about 4 comments at a time, so if I look shifty-eyed, that's what I'm watching for, to make sure I don't miss a comment to a question when it gets asked. You can also email applications@melco.com, and we'll try to get your questions answered as well, or add them on to the next DesignShop Talk. All right, so this week I only had a few questions, so please feel free to type them in, and good morning everybody. So these are the 3 I got. So how do I create a cut file for my application design? How do I measure density? And something about fonts. So let's start off with how do I create a cut file for my applique design. All right. So what that's referring to is cut files are whatever format. Let's say you have a Cameo or a Silhouette or a Roland cutter, Graph Tech, whatever. You have a cutter of some sort that can cut out fabric. I use a laser personally, but that's just because I don't have a cutter. So I just put it on my laser since I have one of those. But what you would do is you'd take your design file, whatever it might be, and this one I have as an applique. It's just, there's a tack down and then there's a zigzag and everything that holds it. So what you'd want to do is select that tack down and save it off. A few different ways you can do it. I can come up here and go File, Save Applique Outline. And when you do that, you can choose, SVG or EPS, whatever format you want. All right. Another would be to just copy and paste it into your application. So for instance, to get that that initial tack down by itself, I would have to first separate this out. So if I select the applique, go to Operations, Convert to Wireframe, all that does is it now makes my, good morning, that makes this a separate element that I can select. So now that it's there, I can either Control C or good morning, hi, edit, copy. Then you can go over to Illustrator or whatever program you use and just Control V or edit paste, and it pastes it in there. Once you have it in Illustrator or whatever program you use, you can save it off into whatever format your particular cutter uses, right? So if it needs a DXF, an SVG, EPS, whatever format, you can save it off to whatever you need. Okay, so that's pretty simple to do. Like I said, you can, when it's in an applique, if you're using something like this, you can just do File, Save Applique Outline, and it'll save it off. If you have your walks stitch for your tack down, you can just copy and paste it off. Now keep in mind, if you are like for me, I use a laser. A laser actually burns material away. So if I actually cut the exact shape of this, it's going to be slightly too small. So just depending on what technology you're using, you might have to scale it up. I scale it up about 4 points, but that's specific to my laser. So it really depends on what technology you're using. Okay, but you can get 1-to-1 if that's what your cutter is able to do just by copying and pasting it. Ooh, we got a lot. We got caps. When a machine asks for a trim before backing up, can I do it on the keypad instead of going back to the computer to trim? Yes, you can. Mike Doe did a video on the channel a while back. I'll post a link to it for you. That has a whole bunch of neat little shortcuts on how to do bypass a trim, how to reposition. There's a whole bunch of different shortcuts on the keypad. When we're done, I'll reply to your comment there with the actual video. It's pretty short and it's got more than just how to bypass the trim. If you want to actually execute a trim, you would hit the needles. Oh, good grief, what is it? The top one in the bottom left. Anyway, I'll put the key codes there for you. All of a sudden the keypad's drawing a blank. I'm just like looking at the you push these 2 buttons. That's not helpful. I'll type them in for you when we're done. All right, let's see. Another question we had was, how do you measure density? All right. So density is a distance between your stitches, right? So it's from one row to the next row. That's what your density is. So if I wanted to measure this out here, I could zoom in close, and for the underlay, it's going to be between that point and that point. So I can use my ruler right here, and if I select the ruler, click on one point to the next, you can see that's a density of 30 points. If I go and measure my top stitching from here to there, that's a density of 4. All right, so you can measure your densities with your ruler by using this. You just zoom in and go from point to point across what you want. There you go, swiper needle case. Those 2 buttons. All right, so that's the trim on the keypad. All right, so that was another one we had. Another question, yeah. Oh, I'm practicing blending. This one was just typed in. I'm practicing blending, and so far it's not easy. My end goal is to have a vertical word transition between 3 colors. Have any tips? I did watch Nate's video. Unfortunately, blending is something that the more you do it, the easier it becomes. The easiest way when you're blending 3 colors is actually to do, I think anyway, is to break your element in half first and do your top color solid, your bottom color solid. So let's say you're doing red and yellow blend, and you've got the top red, the bottom yellow. Well, then you want orange to blend between it. Take that full shape then and use the blending to go across it. It's where you can play with the convex or concave to get the blend to cover up that middle section, and it kind of, all right, I am waving my hands around, which isn't very helpful. Oops. So if I just did an element like this, but not a vector, and say it was a fill, okay, and then I break it in half. So now I'm going to take this, copy and paste it, and then split it in half. All right, so I've got 3 elements now. I've got the full shape, I've got a top and a bottom. So if I want my top to be a red, the bottom to be a yellow, and then I take this other one, which now is going to go over top of all that. But if I do there, you'll see it's just solid color. That's not what we want. We want a blend. So then I can go into the effects, turn on my custom density, and do a, play with the different ones. Let's say exponential. I'm going to turn off all my underlay because we don't need all that with what we're doing here. There. And then make that orange. All right, so then what you would do is just kind of play with these until you get it to blend out right. So we want it, if I do a convex and then reverse it, that makes it blend in the center. So you can see it's got more color in the center than on the top and the bottom to cover up that harsh seam. So really you would just keep playing with the different densities until you can get it to look right. So that's one way to do it. All right. And again, as you're playing with this one, I like using auto. I know Nate doesn't. It's the only reason I like using the auto on there, because as I'm dragging this around, I can see real time what's happening. So I can keep playing with this. Good morning. There was a question that said, that's a nifty tool with the easy break apart button. What level of DS that is? I do know it's level dependent. I believe it is a pro feature. Okay, I use it a lot. All right. What do I need to do to work with Mylar? What are you just wanting to do, like a freestanding lace through the Mylar? You would just lay it down and sew. What application are you looking at, I guess, would be helpful to know. Okay, so Patty, if you let me know that. All right, so let's see what other ones. We did that. If I use a font that's built into DS, will they stitch out good? It's for a slick, puffy jacket. Yeah, so the DesignShop fonts, I like they all stitch out good, I think, anyway. The key to that is you'll see on the code sheets they do have recommended sizes. So if I come into the text, all right, so what is a code sheet? If I double click on it, over here are my code sheets. These will show you what characters are included. You have V10. I have Pro V10. Yeah, you should have it, Cheryl. If you hold this button down, it's originally that one. So it originally looks like that, the box with the 2 arrows. If you hold it down, then you'll see the split element at selected points. So it's a fly out menu. Okay, back to this. The code sheets here will show you the suggested minimum and maximum height of an element. Depending on what your defaults are, to get it to sew right, you may need to turn on some underlays or knots on and off. I've run across people who have this as their defaults. They have all the tie-ins and tie-offs off. They have no underlay, so this is all set to none. Things like that. That's not a recipe for success. If you're not sure what underlays to use, the auto works fantastic, but you really want to make sure you have knots turned on. I do know the auto trim defaults to 64, so that's the default. 64 is like a 1/4 inch piece of thread, which is not my idea of fun, so I like that back down to 20. So I can do letters and have Mylar show through what density do I need. It's okay. All right, we'll come back to that. All right, so back to will my font sew well? If you're dealing with puffy stuff, you want to make sure anything with texture, you would want to make sure that you have enough of an underlay to it to be able to compress everything down so that it doesn't, let's say you're sewing on, I don't know, a minky blanket or something like that. You would want to make sure you have a nice underlay, maybe even a knockdown so that the fur doesn't come and eat everything. Okay, so with that, you'd want to have, make sure you have a decent underlay. If you don't know what underlay you want, use auto, or you can come and select, use maybe a zigzag and an edge walk, or whatever it is, your personal preference. If you're unsure, just use the auto. That works decently. And then always, always, always make sure you have tie-ins and tie-offs. Style 5 is probably the most aggressive knot. It's sometimes quite visible depending on what you're sewing. So if it's showing up and you don't like the look of it, change to a style 1. A style 1 is still a good lock stitch. It's just more it's more hidden in the text itself. All right. So let's see. I'll show you that. Ooh, not what I wanted to do. Let's look here. I'll show you the knot. That's a style 1 versus if I change that to a style 5, you'll see it's a big old X. So right there is a style 5 knot. Okay. All right. So what other? The question on Mylar, they want to sew lettering on Mylar where the Mylar is going to show through. So what density do you need? I think that's kind of a personal preference to some degree, because I can take these letters and change it to something pretty silly. Let's make it like a tackle. And when you're doing that, you probably don't want all that underlay there because you're trying to get kind of a tackle sort of look so that the underlay, the items underneath will show through. So you can do things like this. Just again, make sure you have appropriate tie-in and tie-offs. But is that what you're looking for, or did you want a lower density? So anything, remember thread is what, 3.7 points, 3.8 points, somewhere in there. So anything larger than that, you're going to start seeing little bits of the underlay, the fabric through there. So the higher you make it, the more spread apart your stitches are going to be, and the more Mylar you're going to be able to see through it. Okay. I love in the hoop projects, how do you digitize your own? So that is, we actually did 2 on different Facebook Lives a while back, so I can post links to those. One was for around Easter last time, probably about this time last year, doing a little key fob egg. Um, so how do you do it? It's really going to be what project what do you want to build in the hoop, right? So if you're going to do something with zippers, you would need to get the size of the zipper you're going to want to use so you can design around it. If you're doing something simple like a key fob, so that, let's say I want to take this heart and turn it into a key fob. So I'm going to close the mess I've been making. Let me close all this. Let's go new. Oops. All right. So let's say I want to turn this into an in the hoop project. So first you would decide what size we want it. So let's say I want to keep like a small little heart. And then, so I've got a heart. Now I want to put a little thing that I can fold over, right? To be able to put a snap in or sew it down or whatever. So let's say I'm going to just draw a vector just so I have something to trace and I can size it. Let's say that's going to be, I don't know, 1/2 inch wide. So I can use the yeah, we'll do 1/2 inch wide because when it has a border on it, I'll be able to use the 3/4 inch hardware. Okay, so the little snaps or the D-rings or something like that, key loop, whatever you want. All right, and let's make it, when it folds over, 2 inches, so let's make that 3 inches so we have enough for a fold. And I'm going to turn that off. Okay, oops, not 2, I want 3. Okay, so now I have something to trace. That's probably too big, but whatever. Yeah, it's too big. Oh well, we're going to trace it anyway. So I've got a heart. Now I want to go create my outline for this guy. So I'm going to, if I zoom in, it would be easier. I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to, I'm left clicking around there, holding my alternate key to keep it straight. Okay, so I'm going to turn off that vector. So now I've got something. Okay, so if I want to turn this into in the hoop, I really have to plan out how you want to sew it. So let's say I'm going to lay some vinyl down. I'll do a tack down, and then I will do a so lay the vinyl, tack it down, then I'll do whatever embroidery I want on the heart, which I'm going to go ahead and skip. I would then want to put vinyl on the back and then sew around it all, right? So my first one would be this. I can copy and paste that, give it another color. Okay, so I've got my placement, my tack down. Then I can again copy and paste that. If I wanted to do this as a satin stitch, I could then convert this over. So let's say I take my heart. I can hold my shift key down and click on the single line center. And now that's a satin stitch. Let's make that 40. I like 40 better. Except it did not connect down here, so we have to fix it, which is okay. Let's see. Put that there. This one there. I'm going to delete that. There. Now it's connected. All right, so that's better. And then like this guy, again, I'm going to hold my shift key, change that to something wider. All right, so let's delete those two. So now I just need to run through it all. I've got my placement, my tack down. If I wanted to put a monogram or a letter on there, I could do it now. After those, you might want a zigzag stitch so that you can cut out the vinyl, do a zigzag. So I can again copy this guy and paste it, give it another color, take that and change the density of those. Instead of as a satin, change it to a tackle. And then maybe make that 30. Okay, 25, 27. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, so we have a placement, a tack down. After it's cut, it'll do a zigzag around. I need to put it back on it, so I'm going to copy that one, paste it. So you can see it's just a whole lot of copy and paste and thinking about what you're going to do. Okay. And that's about it. This one will work, right? I've got a placement. I'd hoop my stabilizer, sew it down. So let's build it. So I'd sew a placement. I would lay down my vinyl on top of that. I would sew another stitch, which now is going to hold that down. I would then stop my machine, trim out all my vinyl so it's close, do a zigzag so it holds it in place. If I want to put a monogram on there, I could do it now. If I don't, I would then put vinyl on the underside of the hoop and run this stitch, because that would hold it down again. So that's just another same. I would take it off, trim it on the back, put the hoop back on, and run my final stitch, which would be this guy. And then if my initial stabilizer was something that was water soluble or a plastic, you just pop it right out. Okay. All right, so that was on the fly. A little design. What other questions do we have? I haven't seen any others. So I guess your question was, how do you design your own in the hoop stuff? Well, you plan it out, you know. But when I started doing my own in the hoop stuff, I would actually do it all by hand and get the steps down of how you'd build it. And once you decide how you're going to build it, then you know the steps, step 1, step 2, step 3. Now you just program it in for whatever you want. Okay, what other questions? Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. All right, well, that's all the questions I have. I know I'm cloistered in my house here. I guess with the rest of the world doing the same. Hope everyone's staying safe, learning something, hopefully. I know we got some things planned for the next week on our Facebook Lives and question and answers. Feel free to type in any questions. If you have ideas of stuff you want to learn, I know we're all kind of captive to our locations at the moment through social distancing, you know. Ask away. We'll try to do some different things. All right. So remember, sending your questions to applications@melco.com. If you have different ideas, you know, type them in here. Any questions you might have. All right. All right. Any others? I'm kind of just watching to see if there's any other questions. That's why I'm looking all shifty-eyed before I just call it a day. All right, everyone. Well, I don't see any others coming in, so send us your questions, and I hope this was helpful. Did a little design on the fly. You know, all else fails, I guess we can keep on doing that. All right. Have fun, guys. Talk to you later. Stay healthy. Wash hands. Bye.